It's great to welcome to the program today Roger Hallam, who's a British environmental activist and co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, a movement that uses nonviolent civil disobedience to compel government action on climate change. Roger, it's so great to have you on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
So this is a topic I'm very interested in because I've long argued that here in the United States, for example, calling your elected official and signing a petition online is very rarely going to really achieve the kind of systemic change that we need in order to deal with some of the major issues that are facing us, climate change and environmental issues certainly included. And I know that for me, violent civil disobedience feels like it is over the line, but finding exactly where the line is maybe more complicated than some might think. So can you talk a little bit about your perspective and some of the protests you've organized?
Well, the first thing to say is, as I'm sure people know, the climate change crisis has been going on now for 30 years, since 1990, when scientists first told people that we're heading for this massive catastrophe if something doesn't happen. So as you rightly say, people have been sending emails and lobbying and doing all the conventional stuff for 30 years. And carbon emissions have gone up by 60%, which is beyond bad, as everyone knows. So, Extinction Rebellion came along really with a blank sheet of paper, a bit like what you said, and said, OK, so that's not working. So what needs to work? And the fact of the matter is civil disobedience does work as long as it's constructed in a particular way. And just to sort of expand on that, civil disobedience is a way of peacefully breaking the law that involves respect towards your opponent. So it's really a little bit complicated to get your head around, because obviously you're disrupting people's lives and the government, but at the same time you're saying, look, we want to talk and we want to sort this problem out. And that's really what Extinction Rebellion is about and what civil disobedience is about.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the tactics and techniques that you use?
Yeah, the main way of disrupting governments, I guess, is to sit in the road. Some people paint buildings, some people go on hunger strike. None of this is what people want to do, I hasten to add, right? It's not the sort of thing you do lightly. But thousands of people around the world have now made that decision because the penny's dropped that nothing else is working. And that's the thing that gets the disruption. So there's two things going on. You're disrupting people, but also people are impressed by your sacrifice. People are, getting arrested, going to prison and what have you. And obviously no one does that lightly. So people then tend to think, even if they disagree with you, they think at least they go, well, the guy is actually standing by what he believes in. So maybe there's something to what he's saying. So that's really how it works.
Do we have data as to what the public perception is of some of these actions? Because, for example, in the United States, we've had a number of different protests that involve shutting down a bridge, which is a key commuting artery into or out of a city. And at least anecdotally, a lot of the reaction seems to be, I need to go to work. And if I'm not there, I get fired. I can no longer feed my kids. And it's in a sense a violent act against my ability to put food on my family's table. So I wonder what the reaction, do we have anything empirical about how people do react when they hear about such a protest that is, for example, a blocking the road protest?
Well, the first thing to say is, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Obviously, it's totally maddening if someone's stopping you getting to work. So no one's trying to dispute that. The point of civil disobedience is you're taking responsibility. You're not trying to run away from your actions. It's not like you're blocking the road and then running off. You're basically saying to people, I'm blocking the road. I know I'm acting illegally, and I'm more than prepared to go to court and, suffer for what I've done. I'm prepared to get fined. I'm prepared to go to prison if needs be. So that changes things a little bit. But in terms of how it affects the public, what we need to look at is the public as a whole. And I can give you an interesting stat, for instance, but what happened last year, if you want some specific data on it. Most people in Britain hadn't really heard of the climate emergency, a bit like in America. Everyone thought it was a little bit of a small problem, but actually it's a massive problem. And 1,200 people were arrested last April. It was the biggest civil disobedience in British history. And after that episode, 67% of the British population agreed there was a climate emergency. In other words, there was like tens of millions of conversations in pubs, around kitchen tables where people were going, hang on a minute, there's thousands of people getting arrested. This is a big issue. We sort of knew it was a big issue, and now we know it's a big issue. And that's how attitude change works.
So in other words, even if at the micro level, someone is prevented from getting to work, as an example, if the social consciousness rises to the point where you have critical mass towards action, you consider it a net benefit.
That's what happens on a social level, yeah. But it has to be done in a respectful way. And this is the thing that people often forget. This isn't like just about rioting or about being sort of aggressive and what have you. It's calm, it's ordered, it's respectful. And then, as I said, even if people disagree with you, they certainly have a certain respect for you putting yourself on the line. And I think the other thing we need to understand is that civil disobedience works, but it only works if you're doing something on an issue that's right. If I sit in a road and block you getting to work and I want you to wear a red hat for me or something, you're going to say, I don't care that you're sitting in the road. No way am I going to do that for you. It only really works when everyone knows it's actually real. This is objectively real, what's happening with the climate crisis. And this is the biggest problem, is communicating that we're absolutely in this dire situation. And that's why people are taking this, dramatic step.
One of the tactics that seems to be more of a gray area for different activists, depending on where they draw the line, is the destruction of, for example, imagine that you're protesting logging, going in the middle of the night so nobody gets hurt, and disabling or damaging bulldozers, as an example. It's destruction of property, certainly. It's certainly a crime, but no one is being physically hurt. Where is something like that in your sort of paradigm?
Well, to be honest with you, like the old sort of way of doing direct action, as far as I'm concerned, and I've done 5 years of research at King's College in London on it, the main way to change society is through mass participation civil disobedience, which means like tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people breaking the law in a small way in urban centres where everyone can see them, where that's where the government is, it's the media and what have you. In other words, you go to the capital city. And this sort of thing has been happening in many countries of the world for the last 50 years, particularly in the global south, where, you've probably seen this like in Algeria or Sudan or many other countries. People go to the capital city and say, we don't want to live under a dictatorship, under corruption anymore, and we're sitting down until we get some semblance of democracy. So we're borrowing that methodology from those people and applying it to Western democracies, where we have this corrupt situation of governments listening to fossil fuel companies a lot more to ordinary citizens who are concerned about their children's future. So that's really what we're aiming for, rather than, 10 people doing something in the middle of the night, as it were.
So in other words, it's less about figuring out whether destruction of property is on this side or that side of the line, but recognizing that that's too small an action compared to the mass rally at an urban center to really achieve the sort of attention that you believe is necessary to get change to happen.
Yeah, and it's not, to be honest with you, primarily about the physical disruption. It's more about the emotional communication. When you see someone who's 84 or a kid who's 14 getting dragged off by the police, then that it immediately has an emotional reaction. Whether you're opposed to it or not, you're thinking, what's going on here, And when normal people come out in the streets, and this is what it's all about, it's not about activists or whatever. I'm a farmer. I've been growing food for people for 30 years now. And it's normal people that are starting to take the initiative here, rather than what you might call the old activist communities. And that's the difference with Extinction Rebellion, is it's bringing out people from lots of different politics and cultural backgrounds, farmers, small business people, single mothers, people from all different backgrounds are saying, hang on a minute, this is a universal issue which affects everything that I believe in, whether you've got right-wing values or left-wing values, right? No one wants to see the destruction of America, right? Is that right? I think so.
For the most part, I think that's true.
Yeah, and that's what I'm coming to America to do. I'm promoting my book, Common Sense. It's called Common Sense because it's related to Thomas Paine. I don't know if you know Thomas Paine, but he came to America in the American Revolution. He said to Americans, you're not going to get rid of the British unless you just have a revolution and say, no, we don't want the British crown anymore. And what I'm saying to the American public is you need to deal with this directly by having thousands of people on the street saying, we don't actually want the destruction of our families, our communities, and the American nation. That's fundamentally what this is about.
No question. And we've been talking about the importance of mass rallies at urban centers as a tool for achieving change for years on the program. Roger Hallam is a British environmental activist, co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, author of Common Sense. Roger, such a pleasure having you on, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Yeah, well, thank you, and good luck.